we're going to do something a little different today because my guest wasn't on the guest that I had on my show today, JodieEmery. It did not record. So I got the show up on Blog Talk. I'm going to play it and record it now. Yeah, just remember, my lips won't be moving, but you'll hear my words, alright? We'll try this, see if we can get it up. I want it up on YouTube. You need to hear the show. We'll try it. We'll see how it works, alright? Spend my ocean. Your eyes see everything. The slightest of your motions can make the continents ring. Yet in all your mighty glory, vanished from the sky. Another story, missed millions of man-made lives. They tell us how you fell in the sky. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is JodieEmery. She's the wife of Marc Emery. Their website is called cannabisculture.com, and everything's linked, including Marc's the banner there for Marc's blog. That's the free Marc Emery website. Marc Emery is in prison in the United States. Now, Jodie, I have a banner up on my website for the Hemp USA. Now Tom gets. I'm sure you know Tom. He buys all of his THC-free cannabis hemp from Canada. Now, what is the difference between Canada? How can you grow, hemp, which has very little, if no THC at all, in Canada, and we can't grow it here? And if you would explain to my audience, you are activist. I don't know exactly how long you've been doing the cannabis culture, but over 20 years ago, I helped start High Times in this country. Is your magazine printed in hard copy, and is it available the way High Times is in bookstores around the country?
Well, Cannabis Culture started in 1994 as the Marijuana and Hemp newsletter and turned into Cannabis Canada, a printed magazine, and up until spring 2009 we printed regularly on paper to be sold internationally. But with Marc facing his prison time and with the loss of the seed business and the money that it produced, we were not able to keep the magazine going, so we're no longer in print. And hemp has grown in Canada because Marc and others fought for it, and down in the U.S. you have the DEA opposed to it, so that's the difference.
Now, I heard over the internet that people in Canada were a little upset when California was trying to legalize marijuana, because they said, well, if California legalizes marijuana, Canada's going to lose $20 billion in black market imports. Was that story true?
Well, there is certainly discussion that the market would be affected if people in California could grow legally. It would drain away from Canadian exports, but in all honesty, the U.S. produces most of its own marijuana now anyway, so most of us were disappointed that it wasn't legalized, because that's what we were there to campaign for. That's what I went down there to campaign for. Everybody wants it to be legal. So it was very disappointing when the greed of California growers and dealers destroyed that initiative.
Now, somebody in my chat room says they met Marc in London, Ontario. That they says he can't remember if it was the courthouse or the police station he fired up in front of. Marc was protesting in Toronto, in London, years ago, he says.
Yes, Marc grew up in London, Ontario. That's where he began his activism career and being a businessman who makes money to put it back into causes. So he fought against censorship of music and magazines. He fought against excessive taxation. He fought against a lot of various problems with big government. And that's where he really made a mark for himself earlier on. So after that, Marc has gone on a summer of legalization tour in 2003 when the laws were struck down in Canada for a period of time. So he went on a tour across the country smoking marijuana at police stations, and that was to prove a point that if he were to get arrested, he would go to court and they would declare that marijuana laws were no longer in any force and effect. And that is what happened in the end. All charges were dropped.
Now, what's, I recall in the 60s, people were going to Canada to get out of service in Vietnam. And I talked to Tom with Hemp USA all the time. He's buying all of his products here. What did Marc... how did the United States get involved in this? Why wasn't, if Marc was doing something illegal, why wasn't he arrested in Canada? What's he doing in the United States? What is the jurisdiction? I mean, is this part of the whole North American Union, the Partnership for Prosperity, or whatever they call it, to merge Canada, Mexico, and United States into one big Soviet-style union?
Well, certainly we have law enforcement cooperating and working together and sharing information. Marc's case is unique in that in November 2002, John Walters, then the U.S. drug czar, came up to Vancouver to a Board of Trade meeting with our mayor of Vancouver and the mayor-elect of Vancouver, and said that if Canada were to decriminalize, which was happening federally at that time, that trade would shut down and the U.S. would be furious and all that threats and nonsense. And Marc bought a table at that event, unknown to them, and brought along a bunch of activists and heckled John Walters as a liar, called out bullshit liar whenever he spewed nonsense. International media were there and caught it, and the drug czar was humiliated when the mayor and the mayor-elect said he was an idiot, and he was very furious with Marc. After that meeting, he came down to Marc's store, and the block, the Pop Block in downtown Vancouver, was furious to see that people were in the Amsterdam Cafe smoking marijuana, blowing it in his face, told them to get rid of Marc Emery. The Vancouver police started an investigation, took charges to the Crown in spring 2003, unknown to anybody that this was going on. We only found out after 2005 that this had even happened. But the Vancouver police took their charges to the Crown, and the Crown reviewed it and said, this is nonsense, we're not going to charge him. Of course, Marc is very well known in Canada as a politician who has run for office numerous times, and as a businessman who makes millions of dollars that he funneled right back into the movement. And so the Crown said there was no reason to charge him here. And that pissed off Ian Thurber of the Vancouver Police Department. He's always had an issue with Marc. And he took the information down to the U.S. DEA, knowing that they would get a harsher punishment down there with conspiracy charges. And that's when the U.S. started their investigation based on the Canadian information. And they had Marc indicted with a grand jury in spring 2005, and the raid was in July of 2005. And that's when the seed business ended, the money was gone, and Marc was facing life in prison.
Life in prison in the United States?
Yes.
You see, when I got busted for marijuana in Texas, back when it was a life sentence, potentially a life sentence. Oh, Clay, I can get you 7 years here. If you go before a jury, you might get life. You might get life. So, is that what happened? They offered him a little plea deal?
Yes, there were 2 people arrested with Marc as well, Greg Williams and Michelle Rainey. And Michelle had severe Crohn's disease, which turned into cancer. And on October 20th of last year, she passed away. But Marc was able to get Greg and Michelle to serve no prison time. They both pled guilty and were able to get 2 years probation to be served in Canada. So Marc initially agreed in January 2008 that he would take a 10-year sentence in Canada with a guarantee of 5 years served before he was eligible for parole. That's what the United States agreed to. That's what Marc agreed to, knowing that by doing so, Greg and Michelle would not go to prison at all. And then the U.S., the Canadian federal government refused to accept that plea deal on Marc's behalf. And so Greg and Michelle were still able to move forward with their plea deal, and they provided their, they went down there and they pled guilty and came back home. And then Marc was offered a new plea deal of 5 years to be served in the federal system of the United States. And so he agreed to that, knowing that he would get mandatory minimums on the conspiracy charges of 10 years each per charge, and 5 years is all we could manage, or he would die in prison, and neither of us could live our lives with that. And there was no way for Marc to fight it. I mean, he did sell seeds. He was on 60 Minutes, CNN, known worldwide as a seed seller. There was no way for him to say he wasn't guilty. He was. But guilty of what? Selling seeds, which is being done in the United States, and using the money. In fact, the DEA press release on the day of Marc's arrest didn't even mention seeds once. It was all about him being the leader of a legalization group, the founder of Cannabis Culture magazine, financing marijuana movement in the United States. Marijuana lobbyists have one less pot of money to rely on. It was all politics. It wasn't about seeds. And everybody knows that in Canada, and most of the people who know of Marc in the U.S., that he was not arrested for seeds, because right after he got arrested here in Canada by U.S. agents, 2 Canadian seed sellers were arrested by Canadian police and received 1 month in prison and 1 year on probation, respectively. So we know that Marc was shipped off and sent to the furthest possible place in southern Georgia in a brand new private prison of all non-Americans, because he's a political prisoner. It was to shut him up. But as long as his supporters and me as his wife don't give up, then he won't be forgotten, and people won't forget this drug war, and they won't shut Marc up. They're just making him stronger.
Now, I started my THC Wednesdays, this show. I do this every Wednesday, and I talk about hemp. I talk about cannabis. I had Roger Christie on my show a few months back, and I started my own THC Ministries of Arizona, here in Arizona. Now, because I believe when we were sitting around in the 60s smoking a joint, we were actually passing around a sacrament, and we were right in the 60s. We got another illegal war that cost 58,000, the lives of 58,000 of my brothers. We stopped an illegal war in Vietnam, and suddenly Roger went to jail for basically claiming religious freedom. You know, this is our sacrament, just the way peyote is for Indians, and it's been our human sacrament for more than 10,000 years. Maybe it was just a coincidence that Roger came on my show and then suddenly he was in jail, in prison, without a bond. They're holding him with no bond. They are scared to death. And Jodie, in California right now, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor of California, signed Senate Bill 1449 into law that reduces the adult non-medical marijuana possession charges from a criminal misdemeanor to a civil infraction. That measure amends the California Health and Safety Code so that adult possession up to 28.5 grams of marijuana is classified as an infraction, punishable by a $100 fine, no court appearances, no court of costs, no criminal record. Is that progress? Are we making progress? And is something similar happening in Canada?
Yes, progress is being made. You know, numerous U.S. states have legal medical marijuana, which hasn't happened before. And more people support ending prohibition, especially as the drug war in Mexico gets so much worse and bleeds into the United States. It's a great battle. I can't say we're going to see complete victory in our time, and I don't even know, what everybody's personal definition of complete victory would be. But our job is just to inspire hope. All the people who came before us who struggled for their causes made things a little better. But maybe they didn't ever win, and maybe we won't ever win, but...
Well, it's never been easy to be free in this world, which some people that I've interviewed refer to this as a slave planet.
Yeah, well, it's certainly true that there have always been bad people who want to control the lives of others, so we'll always have that.
Now, here in the United States, we've got High Times, which has been, I was the first distributor in Texas for High Times. And we've got Normal here. Has Normal stepped up to the plate? Has Normal done anything to help either Roger or Marc?
Yes, Normal posted articles about Marc, and when we held the Money Bomb fundraiser to get the transfer specialist lawyer for Marc, Normal helped publicize and advertise that too. Well, Marc has helped contribute to a lot of various groups, including Normal, on a national and state level, and it was good to see some of that come back in kind from them.
Now, I've done stories in my book, Mystery Babylon. I've got the history of the Rothschilds there, and I've also got the history of Operation Watchtower. Now, Operation Watchtower was a document written, and he had it notarized and sent to the NSA by Colonel Edward P. Catolo. And he's talking about being assigned by George Bush, the first George Bush, back when he was CIA director. He was assigned to build radio. His team, Special Forces, went down to Colombia and built a series of radio towers in Colombia to bring planes into Albrook Air Force Base. And at the time, Albrook Air Force Base was pretty controlled in Panama, and it was overseen by George Bush's partner, Manuel Noriega. Catolo says that over 100 planes were brought into there, and the cargo was cocaine. And what his statement is saying is that the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agencies, and the CIA were behind the drug trade. I pointed out, if we could go out in the backyard, plant a seed, grow a marijuana plant in the backyard without having to worry about a helicopter coming out, without having to worry about being arrested, we wouldn't have any drug cartels. We wouldn't have drug cartels. People have asked me, Clay, is that marijuana a gateway drug? I said, oh, absolutely, absolutely. If you got to go to a drug dealer to buy marijuana, then chances are the drug dealer will love to sell you some cocaine, some heroin, some methamphetamine, or maybe a few bootleg Quaaludes, And if they wanted to stop the real crime here, in a victimless crime, there's no corpus delicti. There's no crime here by you putting something in your body. I mean, my God, they want to make vitamin C illegal. They want you to go to a doctor to get vitamin C or Codex alimentarius. So if the government is controlling the input of drugs and then makes it easy to arrest people for that receive those drugs, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's all hypocrisy. I mean, the government does the drug smuggling. They went into Afghanistan for various reasons, one of which is to up the output of heroin. And
yeah, those nasty old Taliban, how dare they? Those nasty old Taliban were destroying the opium poppy crops.
Yeah.
Our soldiers right now are guarding the opium poppy crops in Afghanistan, and we had one fairly famous soldier question that. His name was Pat Tillman.